Organizations typically focus on external cyber threat prevention, but statistics show that insider attacks occur more than 50% of the time and can be a lot more dangerous than external threats. Any employee or contractor with access to your organization's confidential data poses a risk, and knowledge of internal systems can help the insider escape detection. Whether it's an intentional malicious attack or unintended negligence, these threats can result from policy violations or access control misconfigurations that allow elevated system access to trusted employees. These activities often persist undetected for extended periods of time and occur in all types of work environments, from small businesses to enterprise-level operations.
With companies having to turn to remote working to keep business churning, internal controls are being adapted to the changing environment brought on by COVID-19. As a result, the risks companies face from insider cybercrime have only heightened. Helping us to understand these risks, as well as what companies can do to help protect their organizations, is Lyle Lieberman. Lyle is Chief Operating Officer at Janus Associates, the nation's first and oldest IT security consultancy. He begins our program by telling us what the main concerns are today relating to cyber threats and the nature of those threats.
Well, the main concerns are that as people were working from home, their home infrastructures weren't set up from a security standpoint. The level of security that's normally found in a business environment is typically substantially higher, substantially greater, more robust than what you'd find in a residential environment. And the big problem is that you have people working from home. They may be working on a company device, but in many cases, they're working from their own personal machines, laptop or desktop, and who knows where that laptop or desktop has been. The owner or the business person who's working remotely may in fact have been careful, but that's not to say that a partner or one of the children or another resident in the household may have gone onto a site that has poisoned the machine. And then the real problem comes in is when the employee logs into their company network. Is that in fact opening a gateway for malware or for keystroke loggers of one sort or another, or worse yet, ransomware, to find a backdoor into the corporate environment? So that's been a huge, huge problem and a challenge for people in corporate IT.
The bad news is that it may take years to uncover either cyber attacks or malware on your computer. And with the pandemic, it could take even longer, as Lyle explains.
Current studies seem to indicate that the average is 256 days. And that's a very, very long period of time. There are intrusions into corporate networks that have gone unnoticed or unfound for as much as 4 years. There was one recently with a major corporation. It was in the trade papers. The perpetrators went undetected for 4 years, and during that time, they exfiltrated substantial amounts of corporate data, including sales and marketing plans, including HR records, including sensitive emails, and that went on for 4 years. But it's typically in the 200 to 300 day region at this point, unless you have a very robust security infrastructure. And most corporations, especially small and mid-size, don't have that level of sophistication.
When we talk about cybersecurity, hackers, and bad actors, most of the time we think about threats coming from outside the organization. But in fact, often there is a much more significant threat that comes from within an organization. Lyle tells us about these insider threats and what exactly they are.
So the term insider threat is what's typically referred to describe people who are inside your organization and are creating problems for the company from a security standpoint. Insider threats are a huge problem. Many people don't realize it. Statistics show that they make up well in excess of 50% of the successful attacks. An insider threat can be any of a number of different things. It can be a disgruntled employee, someone who was passed over for a raise, someone who was passed over for a promotion. It can be corporate espionage. Someone who applies for a job and you think they're the best thing since sliced bread, except they work for the competition or they work for a cyber criminal gang. Their role in being in your organization is to try to gain access to information. So that's insider threat. One of the ones that's been out there but only recently has come to light is an employee who is having financial difficulties. And so they're stealing information to try to sell it, or the latest and greatest, that's not so great, is within the past 3 months, ransomware gangs have been contacting employees and saying, if you put this piece of software on the system, on your company's system, it will give us access. And then we're going to come in and we're going to plant ransomware and ransomware the system. And when we get paid the $8 million, you're going to get 10%. You're going to get $800,000. And that type of attack is not just conjecture. It's known for a fact that the ransomware gangs are out there doing it. They have posted that sort of thing on the dark web, and there have been instances where employees have been contacted and instead went to the authorities and went to their managers saying, here's what's going on.
One of the issues that ties in with insider threats is access control. Lyle tells us more about why this is a problem.
Who has access to what information? If your systems are deployed properly and access is minimized, that means that the disgruntled person in sales can only access sales documents, maybe the customer files, that sort of thing. But if they have full run of the network, then who knows what they're stealing? Are they stealing your intellectual property and offering it for sale on the dark web? Is it the secret formula for your barbecue sauce? Or worse yet, is it the plans for the F-35 fighter? So access control goes hand in hand with insider threats. It's a huge, huge issue. If an employee leaves and you believe they've stolen information, then you really have a responsibility to bring in a firm that does forensics work.
Lyle describes what a forensics firm would do in this situation.
We have ways of looking at that person's laptop and even or desktop and seeing what they accessed. Did they just look at it? Did they try to print it? Did they try to email it out? Did they in fact email it out? Did they copy it to a flash drive or a CD-ROM or a portable hard drive? And even if the employee has deleted files, that sort of thing, in most cases, not all, but in most cases, they've left breadcrumbs, they've left tracks, and a skilled forensics professional can detect that. They delete a file, but that file is actually still on the hard drive. All that's been deleted is the file name. There are ways to recover the file. It may not have the original name on it. It may just be a bunch of letters and numbers, but that file still exists. So if you think you've had a problem as a result of an insider threat, you certainly want to consider bringing in a forensics group to look at your systems.
The threat of malicious insiders and unintended data exposure has grown exponentially over the past decade. In today's increasingly connected environments, organizations feel vulnerable to exposures caused by insiders. No one wants to suspect employees or business partners of trying to damage their systems or data, but it happens, and more regularly than most suspect. According to Gartner, insider threats account for as much as 70% of all security incidents, and the Ponemon Institute reported that the risk of insider cyber incidents has risen 47% from 2018 to 2020.
Most organizations do not have an insider threat program in place to address the cyber threats we are facing today. Building an insider threat program can assist an organization to anticipate and address dangerous or damaging conduct prior to an incident. Lyle Lieberman tells us more about what can be done to anticipate, mitigate, and prevent insider cyber threat risks.
It goes back to access control. If I'm in sales, I shouldn't have access to HR. I shouldn't have access to accounts payable, receivable. I shouldn't have access to the web applications or the website or things like that. So that's one way. Another way to help tighten things down is to institute a company policy, and this is not only a written policy, but it's done electronically, that locks out USB drives. Locks out USB drives. It locks out actually the USB ports. So the USB port may be in your laptop or your desktop, but it's dead. It does nothing. You plug a cable into it, you don't hear boop. You don't hear any of the tones. It doesn't link up. There are applications out there that not only will do that, will lock out the port, but will notify the security people or the IT people that someone tried plugging in a USB device into Lyle's laptop. If it's during normal business hours, you may want to go back to Lyle and say, Lyle, what were you doing? If it was after business hours, you better be really concerned, because that means someone's been in your facility after hours and is trying to plug something in. And that something, again, could be a USB drive to exfiltrate data, to offload data, or it could be a USB drive that has a piece of malware that opens a backdoor from the internet into your operations. So again, there's all kinds of different things you can do in levels of complexity, and certainly you can throw tons of money at hardware and software at these problems.
Is this a problem that can be solved by money? Is the solution all about hardware and software? Lyle offers his views on the matter.
Hardware and software aren't the total solution. You still need eyes on and hands on, not only from your internal people, but also consultants from the outside who do nothing but security. And the reason for that is if your IT people are watching your IT security, they're going to do the best job they can. But again, they're not focused on it. And if they start seeing problems, they may not have the budget or the time or the will to correct those problems. And that means you're being left unprotected. They're certainly never going to stand up before the board of directors and say, I didn't do my job. They're never going to do that. And so by bringing in an outside firm, and a legitimate firm, and what I mean by that is not a firm that runs on what we refer to as the gotcha principle. Our job as consultants is not to come in and make you look bad. It's not to write a report that throughout the report says, IT didn't do this, they didn't do that, they're terrible, gotcha. That's not our role, and that's not the role of any legitimate security consultancy.
Next, Lyle describes what the role of a security consultant should be.
Our goal is to say, here are the problems, here are the concerns, these are the really critical ones that you have to fix right away. These you better pay attention to. These, when you get a chance, these, yeah, you should fix them, but don't lose sleep over it. And here's what you want to do to fix it. Here are our recommendations. And so that's what a really good report does. And it also explains, from a business perspective, if you don't fix this report, or this problem rather, how is it going to affect your business? Well, if you don't fix this problem, the bad guys can break in and they can access your accounts payable group, and they can set up a phony payable company, a phony vendor, and by the way, they can generate an electronic payment to that phony vendor. In other words, they're going to steal money from you. So that's a critical, and that's one you better fix right away. And so a good report is written in that sort of format where it ranks your vulnerabilities in order of importance.
When it comes to security, it is critical that firewalls are deployed properly. Lyle tells us about the next generation of firewalls.
Firewalls, first of all, for those who aren't familiar with what a firewall is, think about a firewall as being a big wall and a moat around your house. And it's to try to keep the bad people out, or if they scale the fence, they get into the moat, and the moat is going to stop them, whether it's because the water is too cold, too deep, or there are alligators in it. In the case of a next generation, so the original firewalls basically just helped control what came in and what went out. Next generation firewalls, which is pretty much everything that's out there today if you're buying a new firewall, is a device that monitors inbound and outbound web traffic. It looks for threats that may be coming in either by brute force or through email, if you have it set up that way. And it does this in real time, so that as soon as a new threat has been detected by the manufacturer, let's say Palo Alto or Cisco, it doesn't matter who you're talking about, these companies' teams are usually the first ones to see the threats. It gets reported to them, or they find it floating around on the dark web. They generate an alert, and that alert is sent in real time to your firewall. And then this way, if that new threat is seen by the firewall, it stops the traffic and it generates alerts. In the past, just like with antivirus, where you had to go and you had to once a day, once a week, update your software. Well, if you're updating your software once a week, there's a 1 week gap in there where you're not seeing the current threats. So next generation firewalls update those threats as soon as your provider, the manufacturer of that firewall, sees the threat. They're a little more expensive to buy. There's a subscription with it, but they are absolutely worth their weight in gold. And anyone who isn't using a next generation firewall in their infrastructure should really consider it. It's a very, very good deterrent to the bad guys breaking in.
Next, Lyle talks about an incident response plan, what it is and how it works.
An incident response plan is what the name implies, and there are a whole lot of reasons to have an incident response plan. First of all, an incident response plan is a document, and it should be a living, breathing document, meaning one that's updated regularly, not just created once and stuck on the shelf. And it is a game plan for what you as an organization should do if you discover that you've been attacked, successfully attacked. It could be that somebody has been exfiltrating data. It could be that somebody physically broke into your facility and stole a bunch of laptops or servers or whatever. And so this is a document that lays out all the roles and responsibilities, who does what. If you have a CIO gets notified. They look at the situation. If they confirm that, in fact, an event has occurred, who are they bringing in next? Bringing in the information security officer if you have one. They're bringing in other IT people. At some point, they're notifying senior management. CIO, Chief Information Officer, CFO, Chief Financial Officer, CEO, Chief Executive Officer, the president of the company. they may not be notifying the rest of the organization, and typically you don't do that. You wait and see what's been affected. There's no need to, frankly, freak out the entire organization by saying, we've been breached. And you don't want everybody running around going, oh my God, oh my God. You want to control the situation. So an incident response plan protects your daily operations and allows you to get back to work as quickly as possible. But it also has the advantage of possibly protecting you or certainly minimizing your downside legal risk.
Should the organization designate someone to be responsible for the incident response plan? How often should the incident response plan be reviewed? Lyle offers his views on those issues.
Well, first of all, there should be someone who owns the incident response plan in the organization, either someone or a committee. And it should be reviewed ideally quarterly, because when you add, let's say you change the phone system. Well, that is a quantum shift, and you've gone from an internal phone system to a voice over IP like Ring Central or one of the cloud-based systems. That's a quantum shift. So it's important that every time, it should be quarterly, or every time you make a major change. If you add a new server, that's a major change, because on the server, as part of the IR plan, you're going to know that you have server number 14, and on there are the following applications that process the following data. If you deploy a new server and it's not part of the IR plan and you have an issue, well, guess what? That part of your operation isn't going to be addressed properly. And if it was the part of your operation that was successfully attacked, you're going to be left in the dark not knowing what to do. In addition to updating it, at least once a year, preferably every 6 months, you should be doing what's called the tabletop exercise. And that's where you bring all the stakeholders together into a room for a day, and you say, okay, we've been successfully hacked. Open up your binder, and page by page, let's review as a team what's going on here. Let's confirm that everything we need is in here. Let's confirm that all the information is accurate. 6 months, you may have personnel changes. And if it's the middle of the night and the person you need to contact is your corporate counsel, but he's no longer or she's no longer your corporate counsel, what good is that name and phone number in there? It's worthless. So that's, again, why you have to update these plans on a regular basis.
Malicious insiders can be motivated by an extensive range of incentives: greed, financial desperation, blackmail, external loyalties, revenge, entitlement, narcissism, and other incentives. The result is that many more opportunities exist for errors, negligence, carelessness, or simply theft. Protecting the contents of your organization's data systems may be one of the most important elements of managing the business, because it can result in your spending considerable amounts to counteract the results of such an event. At its worst, it could put your company out of business. Today's reality is that most organizations protect data very poorly. Poorly designed and implemented environments provide experienced attackers little opposition to their efforts to steal data, because the action of insiders has opened the door to data at an unprecedented level.
Janus Associates has published a very helpful guide on this topic. Entitled The Guide to Insider Threats for Cybersecurity, it refers to 3 main questions that business, security, and risk leaders should ensure that they address. They are: what are the critical assets? Where are the critical assets located, and how are they protected? And who requires regular access to critical business information? Lyle elaborates on these questions.
When a network is set up, it can be set up a couple of different ways. And one of them is what's called a flat network. And that means that all the files and all the folders are on one or a few servers, It's out there, it's open to anybody in the company. You really don't want to do that. You want to set up a network that's referred to as a segmented network. So you've got a chunk of the network that is for HR. You've got another section of the network that is strictly for accounts payable and receivable. Another one for sales or sales and marketing. One if you're doing manufacturing, intellectual property. So each one has its own, in a sense, think of an office, a file cabinet. Now you have all of these file cabinets in your office. They should be locked, and only people who need to access the HR records should have the key to that file. Well, that's what setting up a properly segmented network is. Everything has its own special place based on what it is, the type of information it is, HR, manufacturing, sales and marketing, financial, and only, and this goes back to the access control conversation that we've had, only those who need to see that information should be allowed access to it. And that's really important. We have gone into numerous situations, including some rather large companies, multi-$100-million companies, where their networks are flat. Everything, including manufacturing, is on the same network.
Lyle explains the problem with a flat network.
Here's the problem with a flat network. The bad guys get in to the network and they start to pivot around. They start moving around within the network. And they don't just go in, by the way, as a rule, and ransomware your system. They go in and they look around. They surveil. This is warfare. They are in your network just looking and figuring out the lay of the land. If it's a flat network, everything is right there for them to gain access to. If it's a segmented network and it's set up really, really well, they may be stuck inside the sales and marketing portion of the network, and they can't get to HR or they can't get to manufacturing.
So why is it important that the bad guys are unable to move in a segmented network? Lyle explains by providing an example.
In automated manufacturing, let's say you're a manufacturer in the aerospace industry and you're doing work for the Department of Defense. And the little teeny tiny parts you're making are all automatically manufactured. They're milled, and that's done by computer control, okay? CNC milling. If I'm the enemy, say I'm from Russia or China or wherever, I could go in there, get into your network if it's flat, move over to the manufacturing side, and I could get in there and theoretically take the parameters that are set up for this little teeny tiny part and tweak the settings so it's a millimeter larger or smaller. No one would know that occurred until the device was put into that jet or that submarine or that tank. And all of a sudden, because of that millimeter change, something doesn't work right. The gun doesn't fire, the aim is off, the nuclear reactor doesn't report properly back to the systems, and all of a sudden you have an overheat or worse, a meltdown. So it's real important to keep your access tightly screwed down and to a point where only those who need to have access to it have access to that segment of your network. Even within manufacturing, the admin for the VP of manufacturing doesn't need access to the CNC milling machines. He or she needs access to the Word documents, the Excel spreadsheets, and maybe only certain ones of that. If an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document has the full-blown plans on how to build that part, what does he or she need access to that for? Chances are he or she doesn't. But if they've been compromised because they have financial problems and a cyber criminal has said, I'll make your financial problems go away. Get me the plans for that little part. And, I'll make that $20,000 Citibank credit card go away. They're going to do it. There's a chance that they're going to steal that data. But if they don't have access to that data, then they can't steal it.
Lyle Lieberman concludes our segment on internal cybersecurity threats and leaves us with his final thought.
As far as a final thought goes, a few things. Number one, nothing is 100%, and that includes cybersecurity. It's never been more important. It's never been more critical. It's got to be something that's focused on regularly and pretty much full-time right now. The cost of not having a properly deployed cybersecurity program in place, and that's everything from hardware and software to policies and procedures to response plans. The downside of not having your house in order is that sooner or later something will happen bad to your organization. If you don't have your house in order, your operations could be crippled. Think in terms of what happens if your e-commerce site is shut down, how much money you're going to lose a day. Beyond that, if someone can't get to your e-commerce site, they're going to go shop elsewhere, and they may never come back. If it's a data breach, you're going to lose customers. You may be under the gun from state and federal regulators. You may end up on the wrong end of a lawsuit, or worse yet, a class action lawsuit. So it's really important to take the time and effort now and look at your cybersecurity posture holistically. It's got to be an all-encompassing plan, one that's regularly maintained and updated, and of course, nobody likes spending money on things that don't generate a return on investment. You buy a new piece of manufacturing equipment, it's going to make us something you can sell. Well, cybersecurity doesn't give you that tangible ROI, that tangible return on investment. But what it does do is it protects your business. And you really have to think in terms of, what am I doing to protect my business, my employees, my customers, the things I make or sell. Looking at it after the fact is too late, and in most cases is crippling and will severely injure your operations, your business, and more than likely put you out of business.